Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of the Nathan Ross Rees Reformer podcast. I'm here today with the amazing and the powerful Raphael Bender. Now, we've been hanging out for a while, and I'm sure on a lot of the different podcasts we've covered a lot of our story already, but today I really wanted to get deeper into the story of breathe education and intertwine that with a kind of a picture of how things used to be. Because every time we look around now, all we see is just studios everywhere, and it would be easy to assume it was always this popular. So, I mean, really interested to see from Raf's perspective how things used to be and how they are now, and how that transitioned over time. So, thank you, Raf, for coming in today.
Great to be here.
Awesome. So, yeah, I'd love you to share some things about yourself to get started, so everyone gets to know a little bit more about you. I think everyone that's been following us for a while knows definitely your story, who you are, and what you've done. But if there's anyone who's brand new to listening today, um, just fill them in a little bit on your story. That'd be awesome.
All right, so the super brief version is I'm 54 years old as we sit and record this. I certified as a Pilates instructor in 2004 and taught for a couple of years, moved down to Melbourne. I'd certified in Sydney, moved down to Melbourne in 2006, opened a studio here in 2007 with a few partners in Melbourne CBD. Ran that studio for a decade, opened a second one somewhere in there. It's a pretty big studio at the time, and probably we'll want to go a bit further into this, but for 6 or 7 of those years, we were literally the only group reformer studio in Melbourne anywhere. And yeah, grew that studio up, sold it in 2016 to my partners, and we started training instructors kind of somewhere in the middle there, about 2009, just because we had a massive studio. We had 20 reformers in one studio, 18 in the others. In the other, we had double small group room with Cadillacs, chairs, barrels, reformers. We had 30 mat studio. Like we had a functional fitness studio. So we had like 42, 3, 4 staff working for us. So we just had really need a lot of instructors. So we started training instructors in 2009, and it was just a little hobby business to train our own instructors. But then I just came to a point where I was kind of sick of running a studio after a decade. And so I sold out to my partners, and I've just been running Breathe Education ever since, just training instructors. We went online started out just used to teach in person at the studio, 12 people in a room. I started flying around the country, teaching in all capital cities every weekend. Then when COVID happened, went online, and now we're 100% online. We've got staff in 4 or 5 countries, students in about 20 countries. Currently got about 500 plus students enrolled. We're doing about, 250 to 300,000 US dollars a month in revenue. Got a team of 18-ish, lose count.
Yep.
Yeah. And somewhere in the middle there, I went back to uni and I did a Bachelor of Exercise and Sports Science and a Master of Clinical Exercise Physiology. So I really like the strength training and flexibility training and all the science of, fitness and performance.
I see in your mantra you're big on taking the pseudoscience and the not sure if it's the correct word, but dogma out of
Yeah, that's a correct word.
out of association with Pilates training. So taking an evidence-based approach to the things that you teach, which I think is fantastic, by the way. So I'd say it was you're probably the first one I've ever seen, at least in my time frame in this space, kind of promoting that angle, because a lot of the different kind of courses out there kind of have their methodology and their alignment to a certain type of time and a certain type of instructor, and this is how it's done, and they kind of keep that path, whereas you seem to be changing whereas new evidence comes out and how you present it and how you create it.
When I started, before I did Pilates, I did Kung Fu for a long time. I learned Kung Fu, and I learned this very traditional form of Kung Fu. It was very what they call a Southern soft style. So it was very similar to Tai Chi and Qigong that we did. So I was learning about to move these kind of subtle energies around the body and stuff. And so, which is 1,000% unscientific. It's just not scientific at all. And then, so when I started Pilates, I sort of started with that same uncritical mindset of like, oh, well, what my teacher told me, that their teacher told them, that their teacher told them, like it's truth handed down from the gods, on stone tablets. And I accepted it uncritically. But then I get obsessive about things, and I got obsessive about Pilates and anatomy, and I just like studied a lot. Like I looked at the books and then I like, okay, what books do they say to read? And I read those books. And so I started knowing a bit about anatomy. And then I was at Toronto studying in Stop Pilates, because I learned Stop Pilates. I was studying at Stop Pilates headquarters one time doing their instructor trainer program to train trainers for them. And I was learning with one of the most senior educators there. She was teaching the trainers to train trainers, at head office. And we were doing this exercise. It was on the chair, and I can't remember what specific exercise, but basically, I said in the manual it says like the hamstrings are working in this exercise. And I said, like, can you explain to me how the hamstrings are working? Because it doesn't make sense to me how this is a hamstring exercise. And I remember she explained, I can't remember what she said, but I just remember listening to her explain and going and thinking like, she doesn't fucking understand what she's talking. Like she just doesn't know the answer and she's just making some shit up. Mm-hmm. Like I knew enough to know it's like, what you're saying is just total bullshit. You're just making this up. And I thought this is that. So that really was a pivotal point for me where I realized, okay, there's so much I still don't know. But like, I know more than this person already. And not only do I know more than her, but she's bullshitting to try and pretend that she knows. And but the whole house of cards crumbled for me in that moment, and I was like, so what else is wrong about about this? And I started looking at it and left everywhere I looked, I was like, oh shit, here's another thing that's just unsubstantiated. And I looked up, and when I went back to uni, when I was in my 40s, I learned how to look at research, and I started looking, and I came to realize that Pilates is not some kind of mystical, magical form of exercise where there's some kind of thing that happens that's not just what happens when you do exercise. Like Pilates is literally just exercise, and so every principle that applies to weightlifting or yoga or calisthenics applies exactly the same to Pilates. Yeah. And I love Pilates. I think Pilates is amazing, and there's something magical about the experience of doing Pilates that just draws people and makes people feel good. But just in terms of the physiology of what happens it's just exercise. And the more I looked in around the industry, the more I saw people just believing in magical thinking and just saying things that were just not true. And that if you go into the exercise science world, these things are completely uncontroversial. Like no one would say these things.
Yep.
But in Pilates, like everyone just accepts it as like, the truth of the gods, you know. And so basically I had that conversion from being like the Kung Fu student who believed in Qi and, all of that stuff. And then I kind of brought that same mindset into Pilates, but then I basically had this conversion moment where I realized, oh no, you can just understand this stuff. It's just science, like it's just, and most of the questions about, what's happening here is like, there's a correct answer to that. And we actually know it most of the time, so, yeah. And so since then I can't stand it when there's a true answer and people are just knowingly saying things that are not true. Like that, I don't know why, but it just really, I can't abide that.
Yeah. Yeah, well, you know better. So, yeah. It is interesting that you can kind of take those two different worlds and bring them together and better articulate exactly what's going on. I know from different posts I think I've seen in the past where it might have been an instructor cueing a certain exercise saying, they're doing maybe like in a crunch position with a straight leg doing a leg lift, saying don't use your hip flexor or something. It's like, well, things like that, it's like, well, that's obviously not practical. It's not how it works. That movement can't happen without the hip flexor.
Right. And I don't have any beef, and I do not judge instructors who say things that are not true. Like if you don't know and you say what you believe is true, but you just happen to be wrong, like that's human. I'm wrong all the time, But where I have a beef is educators who I think they have a moral obligation to know the facts and to share the facts. Like where I have a problem is educators sharing incorrect information, or when people get up on Instagram and maybe they don't have an education company, but they're trying to educate people. I think like if you take it upon yourself to educate people, first you should get your facts straight.
Yep. Oh, that's fantastic. Yeah, definitely.
And
Definitely.
there are very few people in this industry that I feel, very aligned with. You're certainly one of them. There are probably a handful of others I could name.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, I feel like that group kind of gets smaller and smaller, really, because everyone takes things their own direction, which is fine. But yeah, the way things are at the moment, I feel like if I'm gonna predict the next big thing which is gonna happen, I feel like the next big thing that's gonna happen is there's gonna be a huge increase in the amount of educators on the market. I feel like,
Already saying that.
yeah. So as long as whatever everybody is promising, they can kind of live up to it. That's the main thing, I suppose. Like when you're looking to select a course to do, I think the main thing is to go, is this course in alignment with the way I want to teach? And is it in alignment with the person that I want to teach for or the studio I want to teach with? Because if you're learning something which is not going to be useful in that space, then it's kind of like a sidestep rather than a step in the right direction. Yeah. No, and now because there's so many different experiences out there, it doesn't mean they all can't align with like scientific principles that actually of reality. You know what I mean? Like even though it's a different methodology, doesn't mean that the training principles can't be grounded in things that are actually true.
No,
Yeah.
I mean, what makes a difference to your client's results in Pilates is like 20% of what you do in the session. It's like sufficient intensity and sufficient volume, right? And you can make people stronger in 15 minutes out of your session, can be doing like really hard stuff that puts them right to the edge of muscular failure. And you can throw in some mermaids and some legs in straps and whatever in between that if you want. And people will still get stronger,
Yeah.
But as long as you get like all of their major muscle groups to some point of pretty close to failure, at least once, preferably 2 or 3 times in the course of a session, like you can do whatever moves you want. You can cue it pretty much, 5 different ways. You can do whatever, like there's so many ways to do it that can all be right,
Yep.
But like the human body physiology is constant throughout. Doesn't matter what style of Pilates you do. It's like you still got to obey those laws if you want to get results.
That's why everything should have that underlying training principles built into the education. So yeah, it just makes sense there. Yeah.
Which it blows my fucking mind. And I'm sorry, I'm not sure if it's okay to
Oh,
swear on
you
this
can do whatever
podcast.
you like. Yeah.
It blows my mind that is not part of every Pilates education. Like if you want to get your clients stronger, you have to stress their muscles, right? Like there's no way around it,
Yeah.
Yeah. And yet that was 100% absent from my Pilates education when I was trained, when I was being trained, never mentioned once.
Yep.
In fact, it was said, only do 3 reps of this exercise, make sure you keep your form perfect. It's like, well, when you're getting really near failure, you can't keep your form perfect,
Yeah, that's true. Yeah. So that kind of focus then on only doing that kind of rep range, it's pretty much performative movement really. There's no real kind of like physical outcome, isn't it?
I think there is, I've thought a lot about this because I think the fundamental premise that you and I come from, which is that people come to Pilates to get stronger and live happier, healthier, longer lives,
Yep.
be able to pick up their grandkids and walk up the steps without their back hurting and all of that stuff. To me, that is axiomatic. Like that's the foundation of why I do this. And I know that's the same for you, but there are other people who don't come from that assumption and they don't see Pilates as a form of fitness. They see it's about stability and control and, breath and pelvic floor activation. And they basically see it as some kind of magical thing, which ends up being kind of performative in my view. Like when you look at someone, they quote, move beautifully, like gracefully. And, I love watching people who move beautifully. But to me, it's like, well, that's dance,
Mm. Yep.
Pilates is exercise.
Yep.
If you want to move beautifully, go do a dance class.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I think in the way we kind of look at things, I think, it can be kind of frustrating because I think we're kind of very linear in our approach. Like we want to do something to get to an outcome. So if anyone kind of does it in a different way without trying to achieve it, that's maybe the same outcome that we kind of value. It's probably hard for us to see the value in that too. But yeah, I feel after seeing so many different ways of doing things, I'm definitely open to different ideas, but I don't think I'll personally be able to really enjoy anything which is not really in alignment with getting a physical adaptation from the body. Yeah.
I guess, I guess I can see the value in, I guess what you would call classical Pilates or the more graceful sort of intricate forms of Pilates. There is value in all of that movement. And it's like, don't get me wrong, anything that gets people moving is a 10 billion% better than them not moving. And there are lots of benefits of moving in that way, like it's meditative and, you have a sense of belonging and connection with the community. And, you are getting a non-zero amount of exercise. It's pretty small, but it's above zero. But I just feel that, if people get out of the house for an hour once a week to come to Pilates, right, and that's their only formal exercise for the week, it's like I feel like we have a duty of care to get to give them the maximum possible health benefits in that hour. And there is just a fucking mountain of evidence that those benefits accrue almost, entirely from strength training and cardiovascular training, right? So working on your ability to contract muscle A without contracting muscle B, or to articulate your spine, vertebra by vertebra, has almost zero, as far as I know, zero, known health benefits. Whereas just if, how many push-ups you do is a pretty good predictor of how long you're going to live. Not perfect.
Yep.
But like strength has a very good correlation with not only lifespan, but health span, risk of so many chronic diseases, dementia, like all kinds of things.
Yep.
And so if we've got that person for the hour once a week, and they walk out that door and we haven't strengthened them, it's like, I feel like we're just missing a massive opportunity.
Yep. Yeah, it's like a duty of care to guarantee they get like a return on investment.
Yeah.
Yeah.
100%.
Yeah. Yeah. No, well, yeah, I feel the same way. Yeah. So another thing I'd really like to talk to you about is back then you said you were pretty much the only group reformer studio in Melbourne. Now, I can't even, that's to me, like, I remember hearing a story from my grandpa, and he said that because we're from Tasmania originally, and he was from northern Tasmania, and he was a fantastic ballroom dancer, and he used to go around to all the different balls they had, and he'd be traveling quite a lot. And back in the day, he said he was in the Gold Coast when they had one pub. And I was like, what? Can you imagine that? One pub in the Gold Coast. So to hear you say there's one group reformer studio in Melbourne, it's like, it's hard to imagine. It's like, it almost feels like there should be like photos like in black and white.
The oldie-timey Pilates studio.
Yeah. So everyone, I can't even imagine it. Can you kind of share, like paint a picture for us what it was like then?
Yeah, well, when we started there, we were the second. The first one was there called Matrix. They were like half a block from us. They closed down like 6 months after we opened. I think we put them out of business. And so after the first 6 months of us being open, for the next like 7 years, we were literally the only studio in Melbourne that had, I think, more than 4 reformers in the studio. We had 18. And so what that was like was no one knew what a reformer was. It wasn't a thing, you know. So you couldn't just like say Pilates, come and get it, you know. Well, for a start, it was 2007. So like the iPhone 1 came out in 2006, right? So hardly anybody had a smartphone at that point. We were handing out paper flyers on the street.
This is like around the time that Google Maps was invented, wasn't it?
I couldn't tell you, but it's like people had those old Nokia phones with just the LED screens,
Yeah.
you know.
Wow.
And so
Okay.
we were handing out flyers. We would stand outside the studio on Little Collins Street opposite David Jones, hand out flyers, and we'd tour people around, and they'd be like, "Oh, what are those machines?" We're like, "It's a reformer." They're like, "I've never heard of that. What is it?" And so they'd get on it, and we'd show them some footwork, and they'd be like, "Oh my goodness, the whole thing's moving. This is so weird." And it's like they just didn't have a concept of how you could use it, you know, to exercise. Like it just wasn't a thing. So a lot of our challenge was just educating people on what is Pilates and what is group reformer. You know, they were used to Zumba and, you know, Taibo and all of these other kind of aerobic type, you know, step and pump and all these kind of workouts that they did at the gym.
Yep.
So, you know, like now, you know, I hear studio owners saying like, "Oh, the market's saturated." So it's like, yeah, but there's problems at every stage of every market. Like the market wasn't saturated back then, but no one knew what the fuck Pilates was, you know? So we had our own challenges. And, you know, so I think at every stage of the market, like now there's massive opportunity as well, you know, and there was massive opportunity back then. It's just it just comes in a different shape, you know.
I think the thing I find most fascinating is you basically predate every major Reformer Pilates franchise.
Yeah, KX opened in 2010. I trained Aaron. He did his reformer course with us in 2009 or something. I remember I taught him in Little Collins Street. He was telling me like, "Oh, I'm going to open this whole franchise." I was like, "Yeah, mate, whatever," you know. Like, but then he did. You know, I was like, "Fuck, he did it. Good on him." And I remember visiting him in his first studio in Malvern. He had like 10 reformers in there. It was just him teaching 30 classes a week, doing, you know, doing the admin, you know, taking the
Wow.
money, vacuuming the studio at night. Then I remember he opened his second one in Port Melbourne. Went along to that, you know. I mean, you know, I'm really impressed by how well he's done. Club Pilates, they only started in 2010 in the States. So all of those franchises, like we were there a few years before they even opened their first studio anywhere in the world. Yeah. And we never wanted to franchise. Like franchise is not a thing I want to do. But you know, I think they're all great. I think KX has got a lot going for it. Club Pilates is great. There are a bunch of others now upstate and, you know, whatever, that look from the outside. I just know from the outside, look like they're doing great things. So,
Yeah. Yeah. So to imagine a time like it's just funny that everything has an origin story.
yeah.
And you look now, it's just like there's so many massive organizations that are so organized and so funded and so strategic, but they all started from just like one person doing a course, you know.
Yeah,
like
yeah.
well, it was probably your course, you know, back in the day. So that's amazing. It really is cool.
Yeah, I mean, Aaron had the drive and the dream and the ambition. Like I didn't give him any of that. He came prepackaged with all of that stuff, you know.
Yeah. No. I mean, I came through the KX system in 2018. That's when I started. And by that time, that was the fifth studio they'd created. So, yeah, it's been a pretty epic growth. Yeah. And I think a lot of pretty much my educational strategy was to go to as many KX studios as possible and learn from every single instructor, because I always believe that as good as the educational department was, I believe the real innovation and knowledge was actually based in the instructors. And you could tell that based on how well they performed on the schedule. Anyone who was always sold out, and you'd ask the instructors, "Who's your favorite instructor?" "Oh, go here, go here." You go to them and they're better. They know they've created things that didn't exist. They're using different spring settings that weren't in the manuals because they innovated and they made it work. They had different cueing techniques. So I pretty much just went around to every single one and just like learned from everybody and kind of put it together. But to think that all started by Aaron coming to do your course back in the day. It's pretty crazy.
Mm.
Yeah, it's pretty crazy.
Well, that's when you caught my attention. I think, watching you go from this kind of like young, new instructor with stars in your eyes, and just basically I'd watched you go around Australia and go to, 50, 60, I don't know how many studios you went to, like a lot,
About 80.
Yeah. And just when you came back, like how much better you were was just insane. Like you had transformed from like, the low guy on the totem pole to being like you were kick ass. You'd come back and you were like, it was like some kind of Great Gatsby story where you go away and make your fortune and then you come back and you're like this great, powerful lord or something. Like you went away as this kind of like rags to riches story in Pilates skills. Like you went away this is my perception, anyway, like you went away as just a novice instructor and you came back as like someone who was really knew your shit.
Yeah, thank you.
Mm.
Yeah, that was the goal. Just to put myself, it's like, yeah, what they say, your network is your net worth, but like the people that you hang out with, if it kind of rubs off on you, and I'd always just love to analyze them. Like I'd be sitting on a box in the corner, obviously with their permission, and be like just studying the class plan, studying all the elements, and trying to figure out why did it work, why didn't it work, and distill it down to core principles that I could replicate for myself, test them out, see if they worked or not. But I have to say I'm very grateful to everyone that I've ever learnt from, because even if it was just one movement or a different body position or a different cue, like often it'd be like a light bulb moment where I'm like, oh my God, yeah, that's such a good idea. This is why that would work. So without that exposure, it's like you can't really learn in a vacuum. You need to be kind of around people. But yeah, so it's amazing the different growth and progression that's come from that. Why did you make the choice not to get into a franchise strategy? Is it just you tell me. What is it? What's that stopped you from doing that?
Well, I started out as a Pilates instructor. I wasn't a businessman. Didn't know anything about business at all. I didn't know how to sell, didn't know how to market, didn't know finance, didn't know customer service. Like I literally knew nothing. I just knew how to teach Pilates. And so I had to just learn all of that as I went, and so, and now I gradually, as I educated myself, I became more and more interested in business. I got interested in sales and marketing, and then, I even got interested in the finances to a certain extent, and just business structures and strategy. And, looking at the way a franchise model works is basically, as the franchisor, the person selling the franchises, you don't make your money from doing the service anymore. Like, so, for KX, right? Now, just to a disclaimer here, like I know nothing about the internal workings of KX. I'm just looking in from the outside here, but what I know about franchising is like, as a franchisor, Aaron and head office, like their business is not selling Pilates classes. Their business is selling franchises, right? So they've got a whole marketing department to attract franchisees and sell them a franchise. Like that's their business. And so then they make money from, getting fees from the franchisees. And to a certain extent, the incentives are misaligned between the franchisees and the franchisor, right? So it's not the case that, the franchisee, the more money they make, will presumably the more royalties they pay to head office. I don't know the specifics, but presumably there's some alignment there. But the thing is, if you look at the franchisor, you're probably better off to have 150 mediocre studios all paying you a royalty than to have 75 kick-ass ones, right? I'm just guessing, right? Again, I haven't seen their figures. But so that you get this misalignment between the incentives for the franchisor and the franchisees. And so, if I'm the franchisor and you want to come along and open a franchise, and I think, you don't really know what you're doing and you're probably not going to be that successful, but I'd rather have you limping along and sending me 50 grand a year rather than not sell a franchise. So I'll be like, come on, okay, come on, I'll take your money, And so there's a misalignment of incentives there, right?
Mm-hmm.
And now I'm not accusing Aaron of, having malign intentions or anything like that, but I just think the franchise model itself is flawed for that reason. Whereas when you have a company-owned studio and then you open a second, a third, a fourth, a fifth, whatever it might be, well, if one person or one company, one partnership, whatever, owns that all of those studios, well, everyone's incentives are aligned. Like everyone wants all of those studios to succeed, right? I mean, if you open 3 studios, there's no world where you want one of them to not do well. Like you want them to all do well, right?
Yep.
So you're there, checking the quality and training the staff and doing all the innovating and marketing and whatever. And that's all in your own best interest. Like it's your incentive is to make each of those studios work well. So I much prefer a factory, like a company-owned model, just because I think you get a better product. Now there are companies in the world that have cracked that franchise model. Like if you look at the massive companies like Panda Express or like just $1 trillion companies, right? Yeah, there are some people that are doing it really, really, really well.
Yep.
But it's really hard to do it well, I think. And I look at Club Pilates and I look at KX and I look at a bunch of other franchises that got 100 to 600 or 700 franchises, and I see a lot of problems. I see franchisees that feel like they're not getting support. I see misalignment of incentives. I see really inconsistent quality in the different franchises, and I see what I saw from the outside at KX, this sort of around your time, was the most innovative, goal-oriented, energetic, people in the company were actually squashed and pushed out because they weren't towing the company line. It's like the best and brightest were actually discouraged, under that system, which is just insanity. That's a recipe for disaster. And I look at since that time, like KX grew really, really quickly for a few years. I went from 2010 to like 2020, they went from like 1 to 100 franchises. But since then, they basically stagnated. They haven't grown. If anything, a couple have closed, I think. They're, like when I last talked to Aaron in 2020, they were going to open like 400 in Asia the next year or whatever. And I know that hasn't happened. And I think, I'm not privy to any of this. I'm just making stuff up in my mind from what I see on the outside. But from what I know of like, right, well, if you're getting rid of you and James Trineri and all of these other people that are like the innovators and the people that are trying to make it better and push it forward, it's like, well, and then it doesn't get bigger. It's like, yeah, no surprise, So I think that's why I'm not a fan of the franchise model.
Yep. Yeah, well, it's interesting what you say about company studios versus franchisee-run studios.
The benefit of franchise is you can grow really quickly, right? Because you can open another one, because all you have to do is sell one and then that person goes and opens it and they do all the work, right? You give them the systems. But you can open like 30 studios in a year as a franchise. But as a company-owned studio, you can't do it because you've got to come up with all the cash for every studio and you've got to do the construction yourself. And it's like unless you're massively bankrolled.
Yeah.
So if you want to grow fast, franchising is, and grab market share, franchising is a better strategy.
Yep. Yeah. I know that from my experience from seeing a lot of company-run studios, it really depends on who is the manager. Because if the manager isn't aligned, then that has a knock-on effect to everything too. And also the relationship between the head office and the management and the team. There's a lot of things which can break down. So the performance really kind of falls on, if you look at any team, it's only usually the high performers within any space, which kind of bear the load of the entire experience. And if they're not there, then the whole thing just kind of falls apart.
Right. I think the primary job of a leader after setting strategy is to create a culture of high performance and attract and keep those people.
Yeah.
And I think that's much easier, in my view, in a company-run situation where you have a leader who passionately believes in what they do and is obsessive about the quality control.
Yep.
You attract people that are like-minded to that, and if you encourage that and reward that in your employees, then you get more of it.
Yep. Yeah, it's so important. Oh, it's so important. No, it is true. It is a performance-based industry, and you want high performers to be valued and celebrated, and you want them to be in a position where they can kind of motivate and drive other people to that level. Yeah. So your time then seeing all these things change. So if we just fast forward to right now, we're 2025. What is it? July. Now is like you swing a bat and you find a studio somewhere. You turn left, you turn right, you look at your phone, chuck in studio. Like there's 100 meters that way, 300 meters that way. It's like it is crazy to just contrast. You said 2006,
2007, March
2007,
2007.
2007 to 2025. So you're saying that they're just different challenges, but there's still opportunities.
For sure.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, the Pilates industry, we're going through a phase that many other industries have been through. Like if you look at the auto industry in the States in the early 20th century, right? There were, in 1895 or 1890, there were like 0 car makers in the US, right? By 1905, there were like 400, like little auto makers in their garage making car, and then by the 1920s, there were like 500, 600, something like that. And then they started to go out of business. And by the 1930s and 40s, there were like 20, then 15. And then now there's like 3, And so what happened was, well, firstly, it's just this massive explosion where it's like, oh, great, there's no Pilates studio on that corner. I'll open one, right? And now we're at this place. We're in a lot of major capital cities. Like Melbourne's kind of the epicenter of where this all started, right? Melbourne and Sydney. But it's happening in LA and New York and London and stuff now as well, where it's like, you can't swing a cat without hitting 3 Pilates studios, And so there was this glorious period for like 2 or 3 years there, maybe 2022 to 2024, something like that, where it's like, oh, you just open a studio, put Pilates on the sign, and bam, there you go, you got a good business. And that's awesome, right? And so now we're at this point where it's like you can't quite do that anymore because there's like 100 meters in either direction. There's another studio charging $1 a class less, And so what's going to happen now is that, well, there's this great opportunity where you can differentiate yourself. So my friend Heath, who works with me at Breathe, he lives in the UK now. He lives south of London. He went to London a couple of months back and did 9 Pilates classes in a weekend at 9 different studios. Didn't get sore at all from any of the class, like not from doing 9 classes in 2 days. Didn't get sore, right? Not once was he anywhere near like being challenged. And he's pretty strong. He's pretty flexible, but he's like not a superhero. Like he's a normal human,
Yeah.
And it's just like, okay, if you can do 9 classes in 2 days, and you're like, yeah, I feel fine. It's like the classes were so weak.
Yeah.
They were so weak. And it's like, well, there's a lot of opportunity there to do better.
Yep.
A lot of opportunity. And this is not just having a go at London. I think it's probably the same a lot of places. It's probably the same a lot of places. And I was talking with somebody this morning. She said she did Pilates in, she went somewhere like the instructor didn't even tell them which spring to put on or didn't tell them to put the foot bar up. I was like, there's a lot of lame-ass teaching out there.
Yeah.
And so how do you differentiate yourself? Like, well, dear listener, if you want to go to like a Thai restaurant near your house, right, and you look on Google, there's like 5 Thai restaurants in your house, right? So maybe you'll try them all, right? But then guess what? Over months and years, you end up with your favorite one and you go to that same one every freaking time and you never go to the other 4. I know I'm right, right? Why do you go to that same one? Because they've got different menu. No, they've got the same, pad Thai, red curry. They've got the same menu, right? They play the same music. There's some Thai music. There's little Thai kids doing their homework on the table next to the next to the kitchen. It's like it's the same. What's different? The food's better. The service is better.
Yep.
That's what's different. They just do it better.
Yep.
Right? The food is always good, comes out quick, friendly service, bill's always correct. The restaurant's not cold. Like, they just get the basics right.
Yep.
And it's the same with Pilates studios. Give them a fucking good class. Make them stronger. Like, smile, remember their name. It's not that hard.
Yeah.
But most people don't do it. And so I think there's incredible opportunity. You don't have to, dance on TikTok riding a unicycle and, whatever. Like, you just have to give a fucking great class.
Yeah. Well, those things they're easy to do, but they're also easy not to do.
Yeah.
So in an environment where there isn't accountability or there isn't a drive from the person who's doing it, like it's so easy for things just to fall off. And because everyone's coming in from a different training course into a different, when they come into a studio, it's really hard for studios without their own internal processes or really strong leadership to kind of align everybody, because everyone like calls everything that's a different name, different focus on loading, different spring settings for the same exercises, different, like it's just, I see that sometimes when I've got instructors that might come in from a different training background. I'm honestly very reluctant to have anyone come into the system.
Into Rise.
Yeah, because it just takes so long. It takes so long. It actually takes longer with someone who's already established as an instructor than it does to train someone new. When you train someone new, every time you give them something, they just do it, and then there's nothing to change. It's like it's so easy. It's almost like building a house on just like an open slab straight from the ground up, and you just,
Yeah.
everything is in the place you want it to be, and everything is like fundamentally right. Whereas if you're looking to do some kind of grand design, some kind of like uh, rebuild on a different type of structure, and it's got a complex situation and the foundations aren't right, there's just so many things that you have to like figure out, and it's such a personalized educational process to try and figure out what they know, what they don't know, and and then are they resistant to kind of coming into the same direction you're going in. So it's much like our policy really is everyone has to be a client before they become an instructor. But on the occasion that someone does come in from the outside per se, then that process can definitely be a challenging one. But it really comes down to their attitude, really, and their willingness to learn.
I think that I was just thinking that as you were saying that, is that I don't think the problem is that they've learned it wrong or that whatever. It's the problem is they've learned it wrong and they think they're right. That's the problem.
Yeah.
And dear listener, maybe that sounds super arrogant. Maybe it is super arrogant, but I think we come back to what I said earlier in the convo about like the principles of exercise science and coaching and how to make people stronger and deliver an experience in classes. Like this is well understood. This is not rocket surgery.
Yeah.
And I think like certainly everybody has their own style and their own voice and their own vibe. And I think that's fantastic, and that's why we don't have like AI robots teaching the classes. Like we want humans with bringing their own perspective. But everyone has to agree on the facts of how you get someone stronger and how you put a good class together and how you layer things to challenge everyone in the group at the right level. Like those should be like, we talk sometimes in our business about the difference between principle and preference, okay, and stuff like what loading do we use, etc. That's principle. That doesn't matter who's teaching, should be the same.
Yep.
Right. And then it's like, okay, how loud is the music? What jokes do you make? That's more preference.
Yep.
And you can have policies about that in the studios, like we like the music at this volume or whatever. But it's not a principle. It's not like right or wrong, right? It's just like that's the vibe we want here.
Yep.
Whereas like there's only like if you want to get people strong, there's a right way to do it.
Yep. That's right. That's right. Yeah, anything which is kind of like unintentionally created or just unnecessarily complex, it's always just a recipe for like not getting a result. And a lot of the time, helping instructors kind of strip away all these unnecessary layers of complexity to actually say, what the fuck are we doing right now? Like, what are we actually doing this for? Why are we even in this body position? What's the outcome? Getting them to think of what's the purpose of it rather than just we can do this, keeping it simple is like the hardest thing for instructors.
It is.
And artists,
But Nathan, if I came to work for you, I would be an open book. I would be a blank page. I'd be like, okay, teach me how to do it like you, right? Show me tell me what to say, what to do, where to stand. Tell me how to do it, and I'll do it, right? Because if I came to work for you, it would be because I wanted to learn from you. I'll be like, okay, teach me how to do it like you do it.
Yep.
I know how to do it like I do it already. You don't have to teach me that. Teach me your way. And I would want to understand your way before I think you should always imitate before you iterate. Like you should understand and master the way that someone does it before you then go, oh yeah, I'm going to change this and tweak it and make it better.
Yep.
So yeah, for sure. I think you could hire somebody that's got a lot of experience if they've got the mindset of like, yeah, I'm here to learn
Mm.
and I want to learn to do it your way.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, it's important. It's important for the client experience because if the clients can't anticipate what they're going to get, and if it's just fundamentally different and unnecessarily complex or unachievable or things like that, or the spring settings are just incorrect, then like, yeah, you can probably hear the frustration in my voice.
But
Like,
it's you know what kind of really perplexes me about this is that people get into this industry because they're passionate about, like, no one gets into Pilates because they just don't give a shit about Pilates and their parents push them into it, or
yeah,
no one gets into Pilates because they're like, oh, they really don't care about Pilates. They find it boring, but it's like, it's a great way to make a fucking huge amount of money.
Yep.
Like, that's not why people do this. People do it because they love Pilates and they love helping people and they want to make an impact on people. Like, I've never met anyone in Pilates who doesn't feel that way,
Yeah.
right? And so if you feel that way, well, why wouldn't you just like scour the ends of the earth to be the best possible, most effective teacher you could be? Like, I don't understand why you wouldn't.
Yeah.
And so if you look at your class and your class is not like chock-a-block full with a wait list every single day, it's like, well, you're not there yet.
Yeah.
Like.
Yeah. There's room to grow. Yeah, that's right. I think that's just that kind of high performance mindset, that growth mindset that not every single person has. But maybe that just means they're not in the right space, because if you're doing things that you don't feel that passionate about, then you're probably wasting your time, A big part of trying to find people that are right is are they enthusiastic and are they excited and do they care? Like those kind of traits in people you can't really train or change. You need to have that right from the start.
You know what I think is a really good place to find potential future instructors is hospitality. I spent the first sort of decade of my working life in hospitality, working in restaurants and fine dining and bars and stuff. And people who really get customer service, like they really get it, it's about serving the customer. And they are constantly attentive to the customer and thinking like, okay, what does that customer need?
Yeah.
How can I give them a better experience?
Yep.
That mindset, I think, translates perfectly across to Pilates instruction if they can develop the skills of Pilates instruction. It's that mindset of service, and it's like just constantly eagle. Like if you go to a bar or a restaurant, there's a really good server there.
Yep.
Like, you just feel looked after. It's like the bread's almost, oh, there's the next bread. Okay, great. I was just about to ask, and then bam, there it is. And because that person's watching, and they're like, oh, you're almost finished your bread. I'll get you some more. Oh, your drink needs topping up. Bam. And so that's the same when you're walking around the room. Oh, you need another spring. I'm not going to adjust the foot bar for you on this one.
Yep.
You need to lift your butt a bit higher for me on this. Like you need to be looking out. That's what a good instructor does. Is they're anticipating and looking like, how can I serve these people better?
Yep.
And then it's like, okay, well, maybe you realize at some point, it's like, oh, I don't have the skills to serve these people better. I don't know which spring to put on, when that person needs more work or whatever. So I got to go and learn how to do that, But I think that mindset is a very, very good foundation for Pilates teaching.
I think so too. Something just hit me now, and what you said before about the American car industry as parallels to Reformer Pilates in Melbourne, potentially. You said that there was no car manufacturers, and all of a sudden there was like 40, and then there was like 400, and now there's like 3. So do you see that being the same way? Because it's not a level playing field. Obviously, you got these franchises out there that have like marketing spend, teams of people. They've probably got different alignments with different organizations which kind of promote them better or strategically. They can, I suppose, afford to undercut people in certain areas if they want to. So because of that, if you're coming into the space as a new instructor and then you decide, okay, I want to launch my own studio, but you don't have the business background and you don't have a huge budget and you don't have the experience, like you're coming up against some heavy hitters if you're going to get into the same spaces that they're in, and these franchises, they're expanding exponentially into every market. So it's probably more likely that you're going to open up somewhere and they're going to come next to you. So the only way you can really compete against that is if your service is better, definitely, and more personable. But just to ask you, do you see that potentially happening in Melbourne, that eventually there's going to be some kind of refinement in the amount of studios that are available? Things are going to drop off. It gets
Yeah.
too competitive.
Yeah, I think so. But like when you look at, the big three car manufacturers in the US, but they are now in a global economy, right? So there's not just three brands of cars available in the US. There's 100 or whatever, like there's Daewoo and Kia and Toyota and Mercedes. All of these international brands are competing. And what you see as the industry matures is it stratifies, right? So you have your Rolls Royce at the top end of the market and your Daewoo at the bottom end of the market, and little strata layers, right up through for the family that needs a 6-seat people mover, and then you've got Jeep that does 4-wheel drives, and so each brand finds its little niche, right? And so I think and we see the same in the fitness industry, right? There's the personal training gyms and whatever. That's a much more mature industry than Pilates. It's been around decades longer than Pilates, as in terms of like a big commercial kind of explosion. Pilates was around 100 years ago, but it was very, very niche then. But gyms have been around for, a lot longer in terms of being popular. And so we see okay, I think if we look at the future of Pilates 20 years in the future, or even 10 years in the future, we'd look at what's happening with gyms, right? So you have these stratified, you have the big Globo gyms, it's like, 3 acres of, 400 treadmills, 400 bench presses, whatever. And it's like, $30 a month, 24/7 access, and like zero service, right? But that's not what you're paying for. You're paying for like 400 treadmills and $25 a month or whatever it is, and there's like one in every capital city in the world, right?
Yep.
And so, and then you've still got small boutique personal training studios, right? With just mum and pop stores, with like some battle ropes and a few, assault bikes and whatever. And then you've got personal trainers working at gyms. Like you got personal trainers working in the park, you've got online personal trainers, you've got all kinds of people making a living, doing this. And so I think, if we look to the future of Pilates, I think we probably see something similar. Like we probably won't see Pilates studios on the scale of 24/7 fitness, like LA Fitness or whatever. But I think we'll see something similar in that we'll see like the Club Pilates of the world, and maybe there are other franchises coming up now, like Strong and other brands that I think might grow really fast. And for the small operators just opening their first studio, like you are never going. The thing is, don't compete with them where they're strong, right? You can't be cheaper than Globo Gym. You can't have more equipment than Globo Gym. Like you're not going to win that battle.
Yeah.
So you have to compete on service and quality. You have to compete on service and quality. You must be more expensive and you must offer way better service. That's the only way to win. Like if people want cheap, they're going to go to Globo Gym.
Yeah.
You can't possibly win that battle. So I think, you just have to differentiate yourself by being better, like you said. I mean, it sounds pretty simple, and it is simple, but it's not easy.
Yeah. Oh, no, I really like that answer, particularly when you said about the stratification of the market. That makes a lot of sense because it's not really everyone in the same space. It's more like there's the different categories of people in the market for looking for a different type of version of that service that kind of like breaks it up a bit. Yeah.
And there are people who buy a Daewoo, which is some kind of South Korean brand of cheap-ass, small car, because they look at a Mercedes and they look at a Daewoo and they think, well, they both get you from A to B. What's the difference? Why would I spend 100 times the price?
Yep.
And there are people that look at Pilates that way and they go, well, here's this like bespoke, high service thing, and there's like Virgin Active with 28 reformers. Like they're both the same. What's the difference, right? And you are never going to get that client to come to your studio. They're always 10 out of 10 times they're going to go to Virgin Active or whatever big franchise, right? But then there are other clients that don't want a Daewoo. They want the service. They want to pay more for better service. They don't want to be a number in a class of 28. They don't want to be on a wait list. They don't want to like have a rotating roster of 21-year-old instructors that don't know their name.
Yeah.
Like all of those things, they want the opposite, right? They want someone who knows their dog's name and remembers they've got a sore knee and keeps their favourite reformer in the back corner for them and, pushes them in the exercise where they're trying to cheat and hide, like they want all of those things, right?
Yeah.
And they're happy. They want to pay more for that, right? So give them that and charge them more.
Yep. The challenge of, I think you're probably the best person to speak to about this. When it comes to raising prices, obviously there's been a crazy amount of inflation probably in the last 4 years plus. I saw something yesterday about the price of a hamburger at McDonald's in 1996 was like 79 cents. So
insanity.
Yeah, it's like almost feels like you're talking about like the 1950s or 40s or something. You know what I mean? So, raising the prices is not something which is just recommended, but it's basically if you don't do it, then you're gonna be losing big time because obviously inflation versus cost of living and all the different expenses that are rising. So you have to take it up anyway. So that's just a baseline. It has to go up. But then when you're looking at how much you take it up, from your perspective, I think it's very, very clear because you're looking at it from the outside based on logic and data and numbers. But usually when people are looking at this, it's more because they're in it, they can't really see it. So it's like an emotional thing. So how would you help someone who's looking to, maybe they've got a gut feeling they need to raise the prices? How would they do that? Is there a strategy and a time frame that it should be done regularly? What do you think would work?
Yeah, well, so sometimes you just shouldn't raise your price. And so first thing I'll say is like, well, here's how to tell if you should raise your price. So firstly, if you're the same price as all your competitors, you should probably raise your price. But before you do that, you should differentiate yourself, right? So just being more expensive and being just the same mediocre service, like that's not how you win. So if you're like, so firstly, basically just without looking at your competitors, I will just start by looking at your own business. And if your classes are not full, don't raise your price because you're going to probably lose volume and you don't want to lose volume when you're not already not full.
Yeah.
So the first thing to do there is figure out how to fill your classes, and that I'll come to that in a second. So, but if your classes are full, you should raise your prices. And I would say, you should, like, if you've got 1 or 3 or 5 competitors in the local area, like only one of you out of the 5 can be the cheapest. Only one can be the cheapest. And so if you get somebody on the internet who's looking for the cheapest, like second cheapest doesn't win a prize. So if you're not going to be the cheapest, you should be the most expensive and give the best service. Right. And so you can't be the cheapest. If you're listening to this podcast, you don't own Globo Gym, you can't be the cheapest. Right. So forget that. You're not going to win. And just because you see everyone else putting their prices down, they're losing money. So don't follow them down into that dark hole.
Yeah.
Right. It doesn't lead anywhere good. They're going to go out of business. That's how we get from 600 car makers, to 3. Right. Like don't be one of the 597. Like, so you've got to, so don't just like jump off a cliff because little Johnny jumped off a cliff. Don't put your price down just because Mary up the road put her prices down. Charge commensurate with the quality that you provide. Now, maybe, be honest with yourself. Maybe your quality isn't quite where it needs to be yet, right? In which case, that's fine. You can get better. Go do Nathan's Reformer Academy. Learn how to provide that elite level of service. But so I would say, right, so don't be the cheapest. You should be like, I would say 10%, 15% more expensive than the second most expensive in your area. But you need to be 50 or 100% better than that person. Like it needs to be an outsized discrepancy in value. And so, all right, so if your classes aren't full, don't put your prices up yet. First, put your quality up, right? Put your quality up. And that's just what we've talked about and what Nathan talks about, I'm sure, every episode on this podcast, right? Just do those things. And then you need to articulate that on your marketing, like on your website, on your socials. On it's like when I come to your website or your socials, if I see the same, photos that I see on your competitors, if I see the same Joseph Pilates quotes, if I see the same women in perfect active wear doing the same exercises, I can't tell the difference between you and your other four competitors, right? I need to see something on your website that says we're the only one that does X, right? And whatever X is, that's your point of difference. And so you got to figure out what that is, okay? We're the only one that will double your strength, in Pilates. Or we're the only one that remembers your dog's name, like, come here if you don't want to be taught by a bouncy 21-year-old or like whatever your point of, nothing wrong against bouncy 21-year-olds, by the way. But if you're a 54-year-old, you'd probably prefer to be taught by someone who's roughly in your decade or two.
Something you can relate to, maybe.
Yeah. And so, if you're 21, you probably don't want to be taught by a 50-year-old. Same, right? So, know your market and say, we are the only, if you want this is the only place you can get it, right? And so if you're not sure what your point of difference is, well, you probably don't have one. And so you've got to figure it out. And so what's your point of difference? Well, here's one way to find it. One, just do Nathan's Reformer Academy. And honestly, I don't get paid to plug that shit. And in fact, we've got our own thing that is in competition with, but yours is awesome. And people should for sure do it, because if you don't have a point of difference in your studio, this is just going to rock it to the next level. But go secret shop your competitors or look on the forums and figure out what irritates people about your competitors, all right? Is their Monday class always waitlisted? Do they have a revolving roster of new instructors coming in? Is the parking shit? Are the toilets dirty? What's irritating? Are the classes too easy? Are there not enough classes on the schedule? What are the things that you would find irritating if you were a client of that studio? And just fix those in your studio. Make the toilets spotless. Minimize your wait lists. Get the parking situation sorted. All of those things, and just that's your point of difference, right? No wait list, clean toilets, and the parking's free. Bam, sold.
Yep. Yep. So just to summarize, you said basically assess where you are based on the market that you're in, competitors that you're in. Look at the prices. Are you the cheapest? Are you second cheapest? Look at, if you want to increase the price, look to provide more value first, and then solve any problems which are potentially going against the value you want to provide. Maybe it's upgrading some of the equipment. Maybe it is making sure the instructors are more personable. Maybe the classes maybe need to be more in alignment with the studio's mission. Maybe there needs to be more consistency amongst the classes and the instructors, whatever it is. But then once you've provided more value and you've got a product which is already doing well and the demand is there, then put the prices up then.
Yeah. I mean, the price has got to be a reflection of the value, and the value's got to be greater than the price, And I think the fundamental value, like every Pilates studio needs to offer, is results and experience.
Yep.
In that order.
Yep.
And results is people getting stronger, more flexible, and being able to fit into a smaller pair of jeans and walk up the stairs without knee pain.
Yep.
And so you got to learn to do that, and all of your instructors have got to do it consistently, and it's got to be the experience that I can rely on, because I know whichever class I come to, I'm going to get that result. And so you got to fanatically train your instructors and insist that everyone does it the right way. And then the second thing is the experience. And that's where the smiling within 2 seconds after they walk in the door, and remembering their name and their dog's name and their kids' names and their kids' birthdays and which reformer they prefer and how their left knee hurts when you do lunges and all of that stuff, that's crucial. And so there's that. And then the third layer is just all of the peripheral things that aren't the Pilates class. So the toilets, the scheduling app, the wait list process, the cancellation window, the sign-up process, the parking, the cleanliness of the studio, the music, all of that, where do they wait when they wait? Is it crowded? Can they get into the change rooms? All of that stuff. If there was a great, restaurant that you went, you loved it, and go every day, but it's the music's too loud. Eventually you're going to stop going there. food's great, service is great, ambience is great, music's too loud, can't talk with your wife. He's like, let's go to that type late. No, music's too loud. Yeah, right. Okay, let's go around the corner. So like you can have everything right, but you can fuck it up by just having dirty bathrooms or a booking app that's really clunky to use, or no parking, or change rooms that are too small, or and so you have to obsess about that stuff. But first, get the food right. First get the food right. If you get the food wrong, nothing else matters. So get the food right, then get the service right, then get all of the peripheral stuff around the edges of this. Like you got to do it all.
Yeah.
And you got to do it better than your competitors. And then you say, hey, we do all of these things better than our competitors. And people are like, huh, that's true. And then you got a kick-ass business and people will gladly pay more.
Yeah.
Because when you choose your favourite Thai restaurant, you don't go, oh, this one charges, $17 for pad Thai and that one charges $20 for pad Thai. You don't even know the fucking price. No. You just remember this one, the food tastes great, the service is quick and the music's not too loud, right? That's what you remember.
Yep, I feel like we always come back to the same points. Keeping it simple, basically, doing things really well. I really like what you said earlier today. You said the difference between principle and preference. I think that's actually quite profound in its simplicity, but the message there, like knowing some things that are fundamental that everyone must do and other things which you have the ability to kind of have variety in, which is still... you can input a bit more of your personality or a difference in the way you do it, and it doesn't detract from the actual thing you're trying to create.
Yeah.
I think it's a good way of putting that.
Well, I think the things that I just said then, like, results, experience, and then the peripherals, like that's principle.
Yeah.
Right? Like in 20 years, 50 years, 100 years, those sorts of things are still going to be true. Yeah. Right? Which music you play, which specific exercises you do, which piece of equipment you're on, the colour of the walls, all of that's preference. That's going to change. Fashions will come and go. But people still want results. They still want experience and they want convenience. Yep. Like that's not going to change.
Yeah. Fantastic, Matt. Thank you so much for coming in. It's really awesome because being on Raph's podcast a couple of times, it's kind of like a good start for me, really kind of getting into the whole podcast thing. And I know the experience of when you're invited on a podcast for the first time, it's like exciting and there's all the emotions involved with it. So to be able to do that now for you, which wouldn't be exciting for you at all because you've done so many, but I really appreciate you coming out and having a chat today. So thank you very much, Raph.
Oh, it is exciting for me, Nathan. I mean, I've got like 300 plus episodes of Pilates Elephants at this point, but I always enjoy our conversations. I think you've been on my podcast like 4 times at this point. And you might, apart from like people who work in my company, I think you're the person who's been on the podcast the largest number of times. So cool. I always enjoy our conversations, and I'm really, I really appreciate being asked on your podcast. And it's always good to chat.
Thank you. Thank you very much.